Next morning, after Berlin Technik, I was in Berlin Hauptbahnhof. The main reason for this short journey was Heinz Nixdorf MuseumsForum, a computer museum, existence of which I learned only recently. Heinz Nixdorf MuseumsForum is located in Paderborn.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Intercity to Cologne via Wolfsburg, Hanover.
And from Berlin, at least one connection is required along the way. It was a very hot summer, and traveling by train was rather tedious. For me, the stop for the connection was Hanover, known for Tech Geeks Around for being a location of Cebit exhibition. The last Cebit exhibition took place in 2018. From Hanover, via a picturesque line passing by Hameln, the story of the Hameln pipe player originated there, with local football fans cheering most of the way, a local train terminated in Paderborn. Paderborn is a small city. Historically, a city was called a city for the presence of the cathedral, and Paderborn sure has a fancy cathedral there. A book crossing stall on the way from the station had some books with Windows 3.1 computer games, and even with floppies. From the station to the inn, and from the inn to Heinz Nixdorf MuseumsForum, the distances were all quite walkable. The road to the museum goes past the shores of Pader, the shortest river in Germany. The museum hides in plain sight. If not for the prior knowledge, it can easily be mistaken for a commercial building. Having a museum in such a relatively obscure location meant for me that I pretty much had the museum for me alone, despite it being a weekend. The reason for such a peculiar location can be found in the name of the museum. Heinz Nixdorf was a pioneer of computing in post-war West Germany, and his company, Nixdorf Computer, was operating from Paderborn since 1952. Paderborn might not be a huge industrial center, but it was and still is a university town like Cambridge or Lund. For some time, Nixdorf Computer was one of the largest European computer businesses. You might have never heard of Nixdorf, but chances are, if you're in Europe, you've probably used their hardware many times. Nixdorf Computer, then Siemens Nixdorf since 1990, then Winker Nixdorf since 1998, and now Diebold Nixdorf since 2016, were and are in charge of a big chunk of point-of-sales machines, computerized cash registers and ATMs used on the continent and beyond. Nixdorf computers, as it can be seen in the museum, were sold on a shelf for a while, but in past decades the company does the serious business only, and their computers, like the museum, are hidden in plain sight. This adds to a curious obscurity to the museum. Nixdorf just doesn't click like Apple, IBM, or even Toshiba. The entrance area of the museum has a few consoles, mostly mini consoles, but some original ones too. The presence of mini consoles is actually a positive thing. It means that the museum is updating, which is a necessity for a museum covering such a field. For tech museums, it's easy to suffer from Epcot effect. By covering current tech and future trends at one moment, very soon, tech becomes obsolete, and future comes, often different from predictions, making the exhibitions outdated. The difference of Heinz Nixdorf MuseumsForum from more popular computer museums is that it's more of an IT, information technology, informatique museum than just a computer museum. There are less computers to play with, but there is more than just computers around. The first floor of the exhibition would greet you with copies of Sumerian tablets from Mesopotamia. That goes quite a long time before ZX Spectrum and even Space Wars. The museum lacks English text in most cases. This is quite unfortunate. Although I could pretty much understand most of what's going on, chances are I missed opportunities to learn something just by not knowing German. The museum goes deep into explaining storage and sharing of information. There are even displayed pigments used in medieval times. Some of those are used today to paint. And here is a detailed explanation how perspective and conversion from 3D to 2D works. A printing press. An original linotype machine. Telegraphy. Typewriters. Japanese kanji typewriter. And then back to computing. Sampled Kippu from South America. A Japanese soroban. Russian shoti. Mechanical calculators. This one is designed by Leibniz. Some of the items you can touch. Amigo, before there was Commodore Amiga. Similar machine to this was used to automate data processing for US census. Some of the early equipment in the museum is not original, especially the one that demonstrates particularly rare examples. But the copies are well built, like this Pascalina. There's a Turk chess-playing automata. Historically, it was a hoax, controlled not by mechanics but by a hidden person inside. But now, as a robot, the Turk is completely functional, and I presume is being demonstrated on some occasions. There are areas dedicated to mathematical and computing thinkers, from Blaise Pascal to Grace Hopper. Heinz Nixdorf is of course present, and Konrad Zuse neighbors Alan Turing. Something unthinkable in 1940s. Enigma with the inner workings. Turing machine. The floor ends with telephones and teletypes, and with a giant relay telephone station, the one you can play with, especially if you're not like me and with somebody else. Past the terminals and a navigation robot, there was a surprise, a Soviet ESOM 360, but manufactured by Robotron in East Germany. Initially, ESOM 360 was built by cloning IBM 360, and was a standard Soviet computer for a while. Before this, I never knew that the platform was also used in East Germany. A small train track that illustrates procedural calculations using a metaphor of switches and a train, and it displayed which day of the week was the enter day, alongside with some trivia. Apparently, I visited on the birthday of Konrad Zuse. Curiously, the section on Zuse computers was larger in Berlin, in Deutsches Technikmuseum, than here. From there, it was personal computer territory. The display of Nixdorf computers was already mentioned earlier, and beyond there were all the classics, an Apple I reproduction board, an Altair 8800, IMCA 8080, digital PDP-8, even Sol terminal computer. It's not a collection of all the machines, but they're definitely noteworthy examples, continuing with Xerox Spark, Apple II, Commodore PAT, Radio Shack TRS-80, Apple Lisa, Macintosh, iMac G3, Atari 800, Sinclair ZX80, Commodore 64, and of course the IBM PC. The computers can't be touched, and there are only few emulators set up. This is unfortunate, as I always see computers as something most exciting when you can touch and use those. Curiously, the displays are of a now defunct Fujitsu Siemens. Some other displays in the museum are actually manufactured by Winkler Nixdorf, but companies are no more under those names, and the devices can count as the museum pieces themselves. Behind the personal computers is an impressive calculator wall. Even Soviet Electronica MK54 is there, although in the Russian name the letter E is mistaken with Z, making it Zelektronika. Earlier, I was wondering why there was no Kurte to be seen anywhere, and here it was, alongside with some slide rules. A couple of HP calculators also got their own special display. A wall of mice. A reproduction of the first mouse ever, and the first German mouse. A display of telephone phreaking with Captain Crunch whistles. More interactive stuff. Some games with more emulators. The first German game computer, Wolf and Schaff, with an emulation of it too. Now, here I was lucky to be alone, as otherwise I'd have to try the paying station. The last area of the museum is dedicated to what I was most curious about, robotics. An object detection network to be bamboozled. A facial recognition system that guesses your age. Football robot. Lego Mindstorm and Sumo Bots. Omnibot 2000, one of the first attempts to make an affordable home programming robot. Aldebaran Now and others. Jibo, a failed companion robot. My friend Kyla, banned from sale in Europe as it leaked children's data. Dragonbot, a robot setup that draws you a portrait. Move robotic hand that was supposed to count the number of guests. Sony Ibos, the original Hitchhiker bot. The original Tokyo University Android head, one of the first modern-day Android projects. And Kismet robot head on the right. This was the first time spent around British Robot Thespian robot, somewhat limited but popular among science museums. Robot Thespian is usually teleoperated or performs a pre-recorded routine, although the body movement seems to be randomized. The robot is marketed as an actor, and among pre-recorded routines they are totally not copyright infringement reenactments of movie scenes. A recent addition to the area was Beppo, a large industrial manipulator that draws shapes with a broom and sort of plays with a light and a viewer. Finally, there was Nadine, and I released an uncommented recording of Nadine as a separate video. Nadine is a project of Nadia Tailman from Singapore's Institute for Media Innovation of Nanyang Technological University, and in the museum I learned that there were 3 Nadines built, one for the museum and 2 presumably remain in Singapore. Nadine, like Toshiba's Chihiro sisters, has face detection that runs on Microsoft Kinect, and as many robots has broken voice recognition, but I managed to get some gestures on camera. Quite impressed with the silicon sculpt. It's one of the few androids in Europe outside of theme park and animatronics, and the only one that can be seen in public permanently, as others like Illinois in Darmstadt remain within research institutions. After all that can be filmed was filmed, and all that can be touched was touched, what remained is to play with Pepper on the first floor, until the memory on the card ran out. And then it was back to the city, to the inn, to Berlin, and to the airport. Heinz Nixdorf MuseumsForum is not the touchy computer paradise, but it was a good journey overall. The museum says they are the largest in the world, and that might be true by sheer square meters. It might not be the mind-blowing experience to a person familiar with computing history, but it's definitely a good one, especially if you're traveling around, and even more so if you, like me, not consider good enough to see any of the UK and the US museums. Knowing German might help with a visit, but I'd say it's not essential. In this sense, the museum reminded me of the Science Museum in Tokyo, not the Miraikan, but the older one. Big night and good hugs everyone, remember to subscribe here on YouTube and on Patreon, and remember to always have proper ventilation when soldering.